Hi everybody, Pepper here, and I'm so excited to get to talk to you today. We're going to talk about some answers to questions you all have posed to me about the writing life. So if you want to hear some of those answers, stay tuned. That'll be next. Okay, you guys may have realized if you're following my new YouTube channel that I missed a week, and I thought following missing a week, this would be a great time to talk about some of the answers to the questions you all have posed to me about being a writer. Because the reason I missed a week is because my day job has increased in a lot of work that I'm doing. And so I'm trying to juggle a little more, and it was not working to have a YouTube video last week. So I'm starting to try to get things finished with the day job. Not finished, but back into a manageable order. And I thought that was a good indicator of a time to answer some questions that you guys have posed to me about the writing life of writing and being a mom and working a day job. I'm a speech language pathologist during the day, if you didn't know that. I've been a speech language pathologist my entire career outside of college, which is a while, over 20 years now. My specialty in my profession as a speech pathologist is social communication, language. I'm more into that kind of stuff and have had a whole lot of focused practice in that area. So that's what I do during the day. I really like doing that. I used to teach at the university level in communication disorders in their programs, and we moved to a place where there wasn't a university close enough to teach. So I've been working in a mental health clinic as the only speech language pathologist, and it's been such an interesting profession to bring speech and psychology working side by side to really help people. So that's what I do during the day when I'm not in my Batman mode of writing fiction at night. So I've got a few questions here, and I mean, if you guys have questions for me, I happily answer them. And I'll do some of my bookish videos in between, but as I get enough questions to kind of do a video, I'll answer those questions. Today I have, I think, 4 from readers, and I didn't write down everybody who asked these, so hopefully I will get to answer a few. There are like 5 questions within one big question, so we'll see how far I get. I'm going to start with the first question, and it says, how do you manage your time with your regular job, writing, family, etc.? What does a typical day look like? So those are 2 kind of different questions. I'm going to try to answer those. I have never had an opportunity to just be a writer. I've never been able to just focus on writing as my career. So a part of that is that I don't know what it would be like to just be able to write. So I think that's what changes a little bit of how I manage that time. I've always had to work a speech language pathology job, or before speech language pathology, I was a waitress. But I've always had to work, so I don't really know I've made writing fit into that daily schedule. But I will tell you that when my children were little, and I'm working full-time as a speech pathologist in the schools, public schools, and then I was raising these cool kids that I have, and I had them close together. I have 5 kids that were born 8.5 years. All 5 came within 8.5 years. So they were really close together, small, lots of people close together. And so I didn't do a lot of writing during the younger ages of their lives. I did some. I mean, I would take little snippets of moments. Like my kids can tell you, they remember me while I was cooking supper. I had a notepad on the shelf beside of me, and I would make little notes. Or if we were in a restaurant, I'd pull out a napkin and write something down. And a lot of times, while I was driving, I would be daydreaming about a story, and that's still true. The daydreaming part, that's still true about taking notes while cooking too. But as they've gotten older, there allows for more flexibility and time in a different way. And that's really helped with being able to start focusing more on writing and bring more books out into the world. So I'll talk a little bit about that journey so you can kind of see how it kind of evolved. So I've always worked as a speech pathologist, as I said, but I started pursuing writing in 2003, and not really seriously, because I was at that time full-time working, 2 little bitty boys that I was raising. My husband was in seminary and life is crazy, so I was just taking an online class here, a writing course here, a mentor course here, and trying to learn more about the business of writing, because all I knew was that I liked to create stories, and I didn't know if they were any good, that kind of stuff. So then in 2006, I think, or 7, I went to my first, no, it wasn't 2007, because that's 2007 or 2008, I went to my first writers conference and got to just sort of see what that world was like. I was completely unprepared for it, but it was so cool to be with other people who spoke fiction. And that changed how I was like, oh, there's actually a community of writers out there, whether published or not, you're still all writers. So that was so encouraging. And so I started going to these writers conferences. Now, I had been writing since 2002 in various ways. I had different books finished. I think at the point of the 2006 conference, I had written 4 full novels and had sent a few into contests to get some feedback. That was the point, was feedback. I didn't think I was going to win anything, and I didn't. But I got some feedback. In 2009, I started actually submitting, and got rejected, a lot of rejections. I had my first win of a contest in 2011, I think, with the Now Selah Awards that are at the Blue Ridge Christian Writers Conference. I won the overall fiction award there with my book, Just the Way You Are, which is out, and a fun romantic comedy. And that same year, I finaled for the Genesis Awards for unpublished authors, and I finaled with, get this, now you guys already know I write in different genres, so I finaled in 2 very different genres. Are you ready? I finaled Just the Way You Are, finaled as a romantic comedy, and my book Bloodline of the Ancients, which was a paranormal vampire book, finaled in the young adult category. I've been weird for a while. This is just proof. So anyway, finally in 2014, I got my first writing contract. My book came out in 2015, first book, The Thorn Bearer. And it was with a small press. Within a few months, I got another contract for contemporary. So I was writing historical and I was writing contemporary at the same time. And that is where the story began, as far as with the published books. And if you guys look at my backlist, I have books that are contemporary romance, historical romance. I have a true crime. I have some cute little novellas that I have a retelling of a fairy tale. I have a split time. So there's a lot of different ones that I've written. And right now, I'm really grateful to say that I've been kind of sticking with historical romance and contemporary romance for the time being, and that is the trajectory for who knows how long, but for right now. And I'm so grateful. And now I'm with Thomas Nelson, which has been the best experience. I have loved working with them. And Barbara, I've loved working with. They've been so good to me. And then getting to move into working with Thomas Nelson has just been amazing. So trying to make that long story short. So a typical day for writing for me, how do I manage it all? I fit writing into my life. That's the only way I can really explain it. As my kids have gotten older, it's been a little easier. Like, my evenings are freer to, after we've had supper and after we've cleaned up after supper, I'll do writing. And it used to be that I could only do it at 9 and after because you're doing bedtime with kids and all that kind of stuff. And you actually want to have conversations with your spouse. But now that they're all older, usually we do supper cleanup, and I can sit down at the computer around 7 if I want to and start doing some writing. So it's been a little bit more opportunity to write more. I also am grateful that I have Tuesdays for my marketing day. I don't do my speech pathology job on Tuesdays, so I can do all bookish marketing, but that also includes taking kids to appointments that day and things like that that you can't do on the weekends. So fitting it in, I would give anyone who really wants to pursue writing as a parent of young children, I would give you this advice. Be patient. Learn from other people right now in this time. If you really don't have the time to devote to all the things that require you to be a published author right now, don't give up on it. Keep working in behind the scenes, listening to podcasts, going to conferences if you can, writing those books as you can, so that when the time comes, you are ready with books to share, because no editor is going to look at an unfinished story. So at the time, I had 4 going in to maybe 5 going into before I had my first book published. So there were quite a few I went in with, and I had been learning all this information before I became a published author, and I didn't know everything. I've learned that I didn't know very much at all at the time, but I knew more than I would have if I hadn't been trying to learn. So that's what I would tell you to do. I would also say, do not discount daydreaming. What I ended up doing as a young mom was daydreaming about the stories while I was doing other things like cooking or driving kids wherever they needed to go, things like that, as well as having conversations with them and stuff. We did a lot of singing in the car. But I was also daydreaming so that when I did have those 30 minutes to sit down, my brain was primed with creativity and I could just write something. Another piece of advice I would give you is that if you only have 15, 30 minutes that you can sit down and write, because that's real life. And I learned how to write in the nooks and crannies of my life. I didn't have the office. I sat at the kitchen table, or I sat in the middle of the living room and wrote on stuff. I didn't have the office. I've never had an office for writing. It's always been part of another room of the house. But if you have, take those nooks and crannies and make them valuable to you for your writing. For example, if you can write out of sequence, which I do, if you have 15 minutes and you already know exactly what scene is going to happen down the road and you're passionate about it, we write faster when we're passionate. So skip to that scene, write as much of it as you can, because you're going to at least have words on a page that you can edit later. And then go back to where you were chronologically and move up to it. But that's words on a page. That really helped me to break free of the mold if I have to do this in sequential order. Because there were times, mostly kissing scenes, or really people mad at each other, or high suspense, where I was like primed to write that scene. And so I jumped ahead, and I only had 30 minutes for my lunch break. So I was like, and I would get 1,000 words in 30 minutes sometimes, because that the passion was there. Kathy Marie Hake, an author who has written some really fun books, she told me one time to write where the fire is. And in the context of that conversation, it was, what book am I passionate about? Story I'm passionate about. But I found that also applies to what scenes are you passionate about when you only have limited time. And that's really helped me to get lots of words on a page, is moving, if I only have a little bit of time, writing where I'm passionate and filling in the gaps later. Now, not everybody's brain works that way, but it's worked that way for me, and hopefully that would help you. I'm still on question 1, so we may not get all these questions done. I'll come back and do them another time. Typical writing day is what I said. Usually I work during the day, so I get up in the morning, we have breakfast, our family makes breakfast, and then I'm off to work. I get home, usually fix supper, and then from about 7:30 to 8 o'clock, depending on the night, I'll write until about 10:30, sometimes 11 if I'm in a really good writing stint. That usually happens about 4 nights a week. And that works for me. Sometimes I write during lunch breaks, but usually I get big bulk time during the weekends. So I block out a little bit of time on Saturdays and a little bit of time on Sundays, three-ish hours, maybe 4, depending on what needs to happen with writing. And I'll block out those times. Those are the big block times, and that's been pretty consistent for the past several years, is that weekend time, because I don't have as much flexibility during the weekday. So that's kind of like what the writing life looks like. And again, more questions, ask them, I'll try to answer them. The process to get published, we will talk about another time. That's going to take a longer question time. So I will be happy to answer questions about that, because my process to publication has been kind of crazy. And we can talk about, I've done indie, I've done small press, I've done medium press, now I'm in a larger press. We can talk about all that. What's the coolest opportunity you've had as a writer? I would say it's probably going to Scotland with Laura Franz last year with readers. Laura Franz and I had a author reader tour, and we got to go spend about 8 days with readers who signed up to go, and it was just to spend time with us and go to places that mostly Laura had written about, but learn about our stories, learn about the process, have these intimate times of talking together. We did some devotionals. It was really just a sweet time with these readers. So that's probably been one of my favorite parts of, one of the highlights, coolest, I guess. I'm hoping we'll get to do that again. Do my family read my books? Mostly no. My husband has read 1.5 of my books. He likes that he thinks I'm a good writer, but he's not a fiction reader, so no. My dad, who passed away in November, he was a big time reader of my books, probably my biggest fan as far as people who read my books. That is a surprise, because he was this big burly mountain man who had always struggled with reading, and he didn't read any other fiction except my books. And so it was just a sweet, sweet thing to know that he was this huge cheerleader and would read these romance books and have a lot of fun with them too, by the way. My oldest daughter, Lydia, she reads my books, and she has favorites. So if you want to know those favorites, just ask me and I'll tell you. Now, my oldest son, Benjamin, he is a writer himself. I don't think he would really be into what I write. He doesn't, he's not a romance reader, but he does write some interesting fantasy. And so, but he's not much of a reader of my stuff. So I think Phoebe, my younger daughter, will probably end up reading some of my stuff at some point in time, but she's just not into the style I write right now. So there's an answer to that family question. Last question for this video. Where do I get my inspiration for my books? Everywhere. If you guys know my Appalachian stories, I got a lot of inspiration from those, from family history, and from my Granny Spencer, who would tell family history stories orally, which is very much an Appalachian heritage trait. And so I would take these stories she would tell me that seemed impossible, and they would interweave with my fiction and become the stories like Laurel's Dream or The Heart of the Mountains. Izzy, the new series, the Skimarian series, I have always had this idea of writing a fictional town, a fictional country, but I didn't know if I could do it. And it's been in my mind for years and years and years, but I never started a story with this fictional country. And then one day, right before COVID hit, I kind of was thinking, well, what would it be like if somebody set you up as a blind kind of online dating community, online dating community. And all of a sudden, this whole set of texts started coming through, and it was family texts. It was these cousins, and I was like, what is going on? And so the story kind of took over. So I'm not sure what came first and how that was inspired, but once it started, it was like one of the fastest writing episodes I've had was going through Authentically Izzy. That was a really fast writing. Just the Way You Are was a fast writing book, and I was inspired to write it when I went to my first trip to England. And I visited Chatsworth, which you have in Just the Way You Are, and I visited Haddon Hall, which was the inspiration for one of the houses in Just the Way You Are. And so that was lots of fun. That was the inspiration for that. Let's see. My true crime book was, of course, inspired by the true events that happened in my hometown, which that book is called The Red Ribbon. It's outside of what I usually write. True crime's not usually my gig, but I tried that because the publisher was asking for books with a true crime in them, and I had one in my home community. So I used that one, and that was really fun to write because it still stuck with the Appalachian storyline. So there's that. Let's see. I'm trying to think of any other stories. Sometimes it's just something as simple as overhearing a conversation, of watching a movie and seeing a side character and going, I wonder what would happen if that person needed this, or found this, or saw this, and the story starts. So writing inspiration really does come from anywhere, and I know even sometimes it's come from my kids, and they've been inspiration for it. So my goal then, I have like 3 other sets of questions, which I will happily answer in another video. Again, I just wanted to give a shout out to the book I'm going to read next. I am so excited. I just got this in the mail. One Kiss Alone, Nicole Van. I am so excited. I've been waiting for this one. Not just because it has the word kiss in the title, but because it's Nicole Van. And if you've not read her books before, they're clean reads, but the passion is fantastic. And the writing is fantastic. And she was living in Scotland, so a lot of the Scottish stuff is fun too. A book I just finished reading for the second time is Forevermore. Sorry. Forevermore by Kathy Marie Hake. I just mentioned her to you guys. Love her stuff. If you like, it's more of a Western setting. Lots of sweetness. This one has some good humor in it, but it's also dramatic. So if you don't mind going back and looking at some older books that I've written, this one is one of my favorites of hers that she's ever written. But she's also written a funny one called Fancy Pants, if you are interested in looking for that. Another old book, not old book, because, really, what's old mean? Laura Jensen Walker, I don't think is writing anymore, but she wrote the book Miss Invisible, and it kind of is a look at more plus-size heroine and falling in love and always feeling like you've been invisible, but being seen finally by somebody. I fell in love with this book when I first read it over 15 years ago, and I picked it back up last week and read it again and just loved it again. Fun stuff, wonderful writing, humor is great. So those are a few that I am rereading right now. Can't wait to start One Kiss Alone. And if you are interested, Positively Penelope right here comes out next week, so I may do a video related to just Positively Penelope. I am so excited about this book. If you need something lighthearted and fun that will just make you smile, this is probably a book that will do so. Now, I haven't heard the audiobook yet, but the same people who did the audiobook for Authentically Izzy are doing the audiobook for Positively Penelope, and they did a fantastic job with the audiobook for Izzy, so I have high hopes for this one too. All right, question for you guys. Number 1, do you have any other questions for me? Number 2, do you reread books? And what is a book that you have reread recently or often reread? I would love to hear your answers. Thanks so much. Have a great night.